Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're diving into literally one of the most fascinating cultural phenomenon out there. Beneath all the glitter and the catchy pop songs of Eurovision, there's actually this incredibly complex clash happening. It's a collision between the contest's utopian founding ideals and, well, the gritty reality of modern global politics. We're going to take a step-by-step look at how an event completely designed to bring people together is increasingly getting stretched to its absolute limits by the very world it's trying to unite. Okay, let's dive into this. Has this massive cultural institution actually become just too political to survive? It's a question fans, organizers, and critics are all asking right now with a whole lot of urgency. We are watching these super strict rules that demand a totally apolitical environment, constantly collide with an intensely politicized world. But to really get whether the contest can survive this climate, we kind of have to look backward first. We need to figure out exactly what it was originally built to do. Just look at the sheer ambition of this timeline. It's 1945, World War II just ended, and it left behind a completely fractured, devastated continent. Both the physical and emotional borders between nations were harder than they'd ever been. But as we move into the 1950s, a really deliberate search for cultural unity kicks off. Leaders and broadcasters realized they needed a way to foster connection that went way beyond just treaties and trade. And that brings us to 1956, when the very first Eurovision contest was held. The original goal was, honestly, astonishingly pure: to heal a broken continent and forge a shared identity using the universal language of music, all broadcast live across borders. It was a technological and cultural miracle for its time. But as we all know, history rarely goes exactly as planned. And this brings us to what we call the Eurovision paradox. This is the phenomenon where an event created to heal a continent inadvertently becomes a stage for geopolitical discord. There's a really deep, undeniable irony here. By inviting nations to sing for peace under their own flags, the founders accidentally built a modern proxy battleground. By literally giving every country a microphone, the contest inherently gave voice to the exact divisions it was trying so hard to smooth over. So here's our reality check. If we look at this totally impartially, that glittering ideal of pure musical unity, well, it's always been a bit of a myth. Historic political controversies have pretty much constantly simmered right beneath the surface. We're talking about voting blocks based on deeply entrenched historical alliances or subtle lyrical protests hidden inside catchy pop songs. Think about Georgia's barely veiled jab at Russia back in 2009, or Ukraine's really somber historical reflection with Jamala in 2016. The contest has always mirrored the tensions of its era. The idea that this stage was entirely free of politics until just recently is simply inaccurate. The politics haven't appeared out of nowhere. They've just become a lot louder, more visible, and way harder to ignore. So, why is it practically impossible to keep politics out of the contest today? Well, there are a few big reasons. First, there's the inherent national representation. These artists aren't just up there performing as individuals, they are literally carrying their nation's flag and name. You really can't separate a country's cultural output from its global standing. Second, modern geopolitical tensions are sharper and way more interconnected than ever before. When conflicts or major policy shifts happen, they immediately bleed into cultural spaces. And third, the intense global media scrutiny. This isn't just a quaint localized broadcast anymore. It is a massive global event watched by hundreds of millions of people. That means every single interaction, every vote, and every statement is analyzed under an absolute microscope. Let's walk through the exact mechanics of how a modern controversy actually plays out. Step 1. A geopolitical event occurs out in the real world. Step 2 is where things really hit the gas. Social media amplifies the disputes. It acts as this massive, uncontrollable megaphone. What might have been just a localized political disagreement instantly becomes a global trending topic, complete with hashtags and relentless online campaigns. And that leads directly into step 3, where national broadcasters start facing immense public pressure to take a stance, stage a boycott or protest. Finally, we hit step 4, sponsors react. When public pressure mounts, the corporate sponsors who actually fund this massive spectacle start to get nervous. Suddenly, a cultural dispute turns into a very real financial crisis. And this whole cascade effect leads us to a really stark realization. To quote our source directly, national broadcasters are squeezed under pressure as audience reactions and sponsor demands collide with the contest's neutrality rules. Think about the high wire act going on here. Broadcasters are caught perfectly in the crossfire. On one side, you've got passionate audiences and those vital financial sponsors demanding that the broadcaster reflects their political and moral stances. But on the exact opposite side, you have the strict rulebook of the contest demanding absolute, unwavering neutrality. Just one single misstep can result in severe financial penalties, absolute PR disasters, or even getting entirely expelled from the event. And this brilliantly illustrates that when we zoom out, we realize this isn't just a music industry problem. It's a systemic issue for all massive international mega events. On one side, we have Eurovision, with its focus on music, desperately struggling to enforce its apolitical rules. But on the other side, you've got massive sporting organizations like FIFA and the Olympics. They operate in a completely different sphere, sports instead of music, yet they are facing the exact same geopolitical pressures. Whether it's athletes standing on a podium or singers performing on a stage, managing global representation in a fractured world is an incredibly daunting and maybe even impossible task. So, where do we actually go from here? Well, the source outlines 3 distinct structural paths for the contest moving forward. First up is stricter enforcement. This is essentially a zero-tolerance policy for any deviation, really doubling down on that original mandate of strict neutrality. The second option is adapting to allow political expression. This means openly acknowledging that art and politics are entwined and trying to create a controlled space for it. Or third, we could see a radical restructuring of the entire event. That might involve completely changing how countries are represented to try and diffuse the inherent tension. Every single one of these paths carries massive risks and could fundamentally alter the DNA of the contest as we know it today. Which brings us to our final, overarching question to leave you with today. Can Eurovision really remain neutral? Or is an apolitical stage now simply a relic of the past? We've traced how this incredibly beautiful post-war dream of unity has basically slammed headfirst into the hyper-connected, politically charged reality of the modern world. The paradox is clear, right? The very structure that brings nations together is exactly what tears them apart on screen. I highly encourage you to keep an eye on how these massive cultural institutions adapt in the coming years. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the structures behind the spectacle.